Now, I am pleased to say that Craig Kelly, the great Craig Kelly, now joins us for a very special edition of Ice Age Watch, and we've got plenty to discuss today. Craig, thank you so much for joining us.
No, great to be with you on this Sunday morning.
This has been such an amazing week. I was watching all of this stuff from New York while Greta Thunberg was over there doing the whole big speech. It's made headlines around the world, but this all comes at a cost.
Look, it does, and the cost is our kids. It's their psychological well-being.
Eco-anxiety is the word, isn't it?
We are seeing kids being put on antidepressant drugs. We are seeing young women actually admitting that they're having abortions because of fear of climate change. This is like someone yelling fire in a crowded theatre. They are causing hysteric, alarm and panic.
And so I understand that the project had something to say about that.
Yeah, well, I actually made a speech in Parliament, which the project cut, and asked the kids about comments. And my whole point was that the kids are being lied to. They're not being told the truth. So maybe we could go to one of those quick grabs.
People are dying. The world is frying.
But today the movement became cross-generational. Business leaders and their staff walking off the job too. These old blokes in suits, though, well, they weren't really listening.
We've got a whole lot of absolutely irresponsible activists right now.
You are being used and manipulated, and everything you are told is a lie. Don't be a sheep, think for yourself.
Luckily, they are thinking for themselves.
The facts are, there is no link between climate change and drought.
That's just not true at all. I don't know how they get these facts.
See, you could see there that actually what I was saying, that there is no link between drought and climate change. Now, that's not my words. I'm not a climate expert. I listen to the experts.
Yep.
They are the exact words used by one of our most senior climate change scientists, Professor Andy Pittman, AO.
And I think we've got a grab of Andy Pittman here that we can listen to. Let's have a listen to that.
And this may not be what you expect to hear, but as far as the climate scientists know, there is no link between climate change and drought. Now, that may not be what you read in the newspapers and sometimes hear commented, but there is no reason a priori why climate change should make the landscape more arid.
Now, what you heard there were the exact words of Andy Pittman, and yet you've got the project show allowing kids to come on and say, oh, no, this is completely untrue, this is not true. You think if they were honest and they were doing the right thing by the kids, they would actually play that grab and tell these kids the truth.
You don't underestimate those that protest for stopping climate change and global warming. We should not underestimate what little research they've done into the issue. Because I remember Alan Jones asking Tanya Plibersek how much CO2 was in the air. She had no idea, and then she sort of implied that there was a lot, like half or something. There's 3%. 3%. She had no idea. So do not overestimate how smart these people are, including those on the project, including the school kids, their teachers, and people on the other side of politics.
But these climate activists have infiltrated all the media, and we have, in this case, a program that does influence young people so strongly. It's so concerning. And they don't have the balance of another perspective. They just bring it out as though it's all correct and shouldn't be questioned, and it's terrifying.
Well, it gets better. Because then I went on in my speech in Parliament to talk about the polar bears. We might have that grab up there as well.
Bears are increasing in number.
That's false. We know that they're lying. Ice is melting in the Atlantic and Antarctic, and the polar bears and wildlife down there is dying.
Now, just remember what that young girl said. She said the polar bears down there in the Antarctic are dying. Don't these kids know there's no polar bears in the Antarctic? and you would have thought someone from the project show would say, yeah, we can't put that to air, but they let it go to air. This is how ill-informed our kids are. Yep. Now, firstly, even in the Arctic, if you look at the science, Professor Susan Crockford, one of the most senior experts in polar bears in the world, has said there's been an increase in polar bears over the last several decades. And in the Antarctic, there's actually been an increase in sea ice over the last 40 years. The trend is up, not down. So you've got these kids hopelessly ill-informed, and the real danger is that they actually think that they are 100% correct.
Because no one has told them anything else in the schools, and they're not getting both sides of the story. I think there was a third bit, I think, of this here.
Let's get to play the third bit, and we'll see how we go here.
Today's generation is safer from extreme weather than at any time in human history.
No, that is absolutely false. I think they just refuse to believe in the facts.
Here the kids, they refuse to believe in the facts. Now, those facts about kids being safer today, they come from the United Nations-sponsored database of international disasters, which actually record the number of deaths. We've gone from the 1930s, we had around 400,000 deaths per year, down to about 250,000 deaths in the 1950s, down to around 100,000 in the early 1970s. Since this century, it's been down to about 30,000. And last year, we had the lowest number of deaths ever recorded from extreme weather events.
And isn't it, though, that, you know, one of the things that really just drives me nuts about this whole discussion is that the solutions that are being talked about are not, let's figure out new clean energy sources. At the UN, it's all about we need to make do with less, we need to implement socialism. And I can tell you what, studying it around the world, these sorts of policies always lead to dirtier, not cleaner environments. And if you want a cleaner environment, which I think we all do, we want prosperity. But on the subject of these climate emergencies, Craig, you know, we've been seeing city council, we've seen, I think, probably my local council, because they boycott everything, and everybody else has been, you know, oh, no, they were the first council to boycott Israel. We were so proud of that then anyway. But there's all of these people declaring climate emergencies, cheering it on, yay, we've declared a climate emergency. But you're saying, and you've got evidence here, that scientists say that actually there's no emergency.
Well, firstly, 2 weeks ago, we had 500 of the world's leading scientists, not 10 or 20, 500 signed a letter to the United Nations saying there is no climate emergency. That's what they said unequivocally. Sign it in writing, put it in the United Nations, and yet we have these councils, and now we've actually got a state government. A parliament, the upper house in South Australia, have come on and declared a climate emergency.
Yeah, because they've put too much emphasis on renewables. That is an emergency.
Didn't the IPCC ignore that too? I think I read that, in fact, those scientists were, you know, they conveniently lost that. But to me, the emergency is the fact that we have children who have been brainwashed. But they're also, you know, look at those kids with their quotes there. It's like they're celebrities now, and they're parroting off all these phrases that don't have any meaning, but they're part of this cult group and this tribalism, which is so dangerous, and I don't know how we're going to address that.
Well, yeah, Craig.
Well, the real danger is when you've got South Australia upper house of parliament, they are aiding and abetting these falsehoods, these false stories, and it is causing psychological damage, this hysteria is causing, to kids. This is why, as responsible members of parliament, we've got to call it out, but we've got many on the left side of politics. They are using this, they are taking advantage of this hysteria to try and brainwash kids to their side of politics.
If there is a true climate emergency, all right, let's take South Australia at their word. Well, wouldn't you say that the thing that they should be doing then is, you know, opening up their nuclear program so that they can get the power that they need without winding up with all these nasty greenhouse emissions you get from burning coal?
Well, firstly, let's look at South Australia. Let's look at the ignorance that South Australian Parliament showed the history. The biggest heat wave they had in South Australia was back in 1939. That was the most dangerous heat wave that they have. They had scores of deaths. They had fires in the hills there in South Australia. The temperature actually hit there 117.7 degrees. Now, that's more than 47 degrees in Celsius. And yet that's forgotten, sent completely down the memory hole of their history, and it's a climate emergency today. The climate emergency was what their grandparents and great-parents went through in the 1930s without air conditioning.
Without air conditioning, or without heating. And so, therefore, they died from the cold, etc., as we've seen occur in present-day times. Can I just add, in terms of research and development, instead of throwing money to third-world countries to try and stop climate change, how about we put our money into research and development, because the world has a wonderful record and history for solving through technology and invention the greatest problems we face. And we can solve, if this is as much of an emergency as they're saying, why aren't we throwing money into more research and development?
Exactly right. I mean, you know, the whole history of the world, the West, since the Enlightenment has been, let us go and discover new and better ways to do things. And to me, it strikes me of a neo sort of primitive way of dealing with things where we just throw out all our technology and we say we're just going to have to go back to the past and live a poor and more decimated life.
Well, we have nuclear, as you were saying, ready to go. But isn't this space race now, the fact that we've joined this Mars program going to help us all with weather and all this research? Isn't that why we're doing it?
The real emergency in South Australia is the cost of their electricity. They now have, by many measures, the highest priced electricity in the world, the highest in Australia, and they have the lowest use per household of electricity in South Australia.
Ridiculous.